to the submission made by National Union of Mine Makers on the mismanagement of the steam generator replacement contract and the state of electricity grid. This meeting is long overdue. I need to emphasize that because we should have already dealt with this thing long ago. However, we have been informed that members of the National Union of Mine Workers who are working on the SGR project have since been suspended. We have received the presentation, and the presentation does not address this serious allegation of maladministration raised by NUM. By the way, that was one of the main objectives why the Joint Committee visited the Koeberg power station in order to investigate this matter. Any person or organization, honorable members, is protected by the Constitution to write to Parliament for intervention. Suspending employees for whistleblowing is tantamount to victimization and also a sign of poor understanding of the role of union in the workplace. The presentation is incomplete and we need clarity. It means we will not be able to finalize our oversight report. And that is said, before we start, I would love Honorable Luzipo, the chairperson of the Mineral Resources and Energy, to give his input on the matter before we start the meeting. Honorable Luzipo.
Chair, it's Masaule here.
Okay, Masaule.
Good morning to you. Good morning to colleagues. I'm trying to locate the chair of Mineral Resources and Energy. As soon as he logs in, he will make the input. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Masaule. Well, if Honorable Masaule has not yet logged in and the Honorable Luzipo has not logged in and Honorable Masaule is still trying to get hold of him, we will have. Hello?
Yeah, it's the Sun Chair. I thought maybe we could do the apologies and just a roll call in the meantime.
Okay, go ahead, Secretary.
Yes, Secretary. Thank you, Chair. The apologies I've received from the Mineral Resources Committee, it's Mr. Langa, Mr. Volmarans, and Mr. Zungula. And then from our committee is Mr. Maspiri and Mr. Kwankwa. And then the delegation from the department and Eskom is comprised of led by the Deputy Minister, the Acting DG, Ms. Jeki Mudisani, Acting Chief Director for Energy Enterprises. And then from Eskom, we've got the Chairperson of the Board, Professor Makoba, Dr. Makubela, Professor Mongalo, Ms. Mavuso, Dr. Crompton, who's going to join us late. And then the executives, we've got the Group Chief Executive, Mr. Andre de Reiter, the Chief COO, the Group COO, Mr. Jan Oboloza, the General Manager for Strategy and Planning, Mr. Matthew Mflat-Telwa, Company Secretary is Mlauli Manjingolo, General Manager, System Operator Isabel Fick, Senior Manager, National Control is Gav Harford, and the Acting General Manager for Stakeholder Relations is the Natasha Sitole. That's the delegation, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. So, is there any voice I'm hearing somebody?
Yes, Chair, and the apology of the minister still stands. He is at cabinet meeting.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to everybody. I've already welcomed everybody. Thank you for that briefing, Secretary. From now, because Mr. Luzipo, who's supposed to co-chair the meeting with me, is still trying to get in. And while we're still waiting for him, I will suggest that the minister, the deputy minister, Honorable Mr. Maswale, to take us through with his overview, and so that we can get the presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Greetings to all the members, and then greetings as well to the board of Eskom, as well as the executive team, our entire delegation to this important meeting to follow through on the oversight visit. Chair, this meeting is, as you have indicated, a result of a visit you undertook to which certain observations were made. It is therefore the meeting in which to give feedback overall and the status of progress since that time on all the matters. Given that, Chair, I would like not to waste time, invite the board to take the stage, and then the executive team, in whatever way they will indicate who's going to lead the presentation. With your permission, Chair, I really request as such. Are you in agreement, Chair?
Oh, sorry, man. I forgot to unmute. Yes. We are in the same slate, Deputy Minister.
Thank you. The Prof then may proceed.
Thank you, Honorable DM and the joint chairs, particularly the chair that is currently present, Kaya, and the honorable members of both of this portfolio committee. I just am here out of respect, I think, for this portfolio committees. I have already been overbooked, but I thought I would introduce the team and let the deliberations take place. As the chair has correctly, I think, stated, this is a follow-up. This is long overdue, and I wish it had actually we had been notified a little bit in time, because one would have rearranged one's schedule. But nevertheless, be that as it may, I think we are all cramped for time, and the team, our team, has prepared a presentation. I understand from the introduction, it doesn't necessarily address the issues that have been raised, but be that as it may, one of the, I think, the lessons we learned from this oversight portfolio committees is the robustness and the insightfulness of the questions that they pose, so that we can provide, I think, the answers that I think live up to the accountability that we need to provide. The team today is led by Andre and Jan and the various other delegated members that you have already been introduced. My colleagues, I think, on the board, Professor Mungalo, Banotile, Rod, and I think there's a fourth one that I've just escaped my mind, will be here to, on behalf of the board, and take you through. But Andre obviously will be the conductor of the orchestra, and I hope that you'll enjoy the music. There may be a few notes that you may want to improve upon, but I wish you well, and want to retire into the other commitments that I have to do that have already been on my schedule today. But again, I thank the honorable members, the two chairs, and the honorable deputy minister for this important meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. But before you leave, Prof, I would like to emphasize, while we might enjoy the music, but you must also understand that this music has to have a particular genre. And in that genre is the issue that I've already put off, the presentation being not complete.
Yeah.
And also there has been, we are in this process because we wanted to follow up on the issues raised by NUM. And the disappointing to get that NUM people who were in the forefront of raising these matters to us are suspended. That's a serious concern from where we stay, where we are sitting currently. I just want you to acknowledge that is a serious problem because it's interfering with our work as a parliament. Our work as a parliament is oversight. We would love to be also respected, while we respect both the executive and the stakeholders that we are working with. We will also would like to also do the same to us. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Chair, and I will follow this up. And I think the point that you've made that the presentation is incomplete, does not address the issues that you wanted to be addressed, and there is this complication of having suspended people. I can promise to both chairs that I will follow this up after the meeting, and maybe I'll write back to both of you my own observation as to what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Honorable
Chairperson. Oh, okay.
Can we
Chair, I wanted to indicate that it's on the plan.
His opening remarks before we continue? Thank you, Mohlaule, for your assistance. Honorable Chairperson Luzipo.
No, good morning, Chair, and the honorable members and the delegations present, including the DM of Public Enterprise. Now, if the Chair has made the opening remarks, I don't think we all have just to introduce that. Yes, I'm present, I'm in the meeting. I just
recording in progress.
I just had some technical challenges, Chair. I think we can proceed with the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Luzipo. Back to the presenters, Eskom, the Deputy Minister.
Chair, I think Andre can then fly to the presentation and speak to the matters.
Thank you. CEO, Group CEO.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, for the opportunity to present to the joint committee on the matters raised. Just for the record, we were verbally informed of the meeting on Friday, and we received the agenda on Saturday. So that regrettably did not give us a lot of time to prepare. And on the agenda also the matter related to the suspension of certain senior managers at the Koeberg plant was not included. So we, if we have omitted to address the full expectations of the committee, we apologize for that. Maybe the expectations weren't entirely clear to us from the outset. Chair, if I may, there are two matters that we wish to deal with. The first one deals with the system status and outlook. With your permission, I would like to request Ms. Isabel Fick to take the committee through that. If that is to your satisfaction, we can then deal with the Koeberg matters after that, and then be at your disposal for any questions that you might have. Chair, if you can please indicate whether that meets with your approval.
Honorable Chair.
I think silence is consent.
No,
TM, I think the
I'm not.
chairperson would have said up to you.
Yes, that's what I understand to be the case.
Yes.
Come again.
Andre, I suggest, Andre, you proceed with the presentation as you have mapped out.
But thank you very much, honourable members. I will then ask Ms. Fick to proceed with the presentation. Isabel, please, if you can carry on.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning still. I hope you're all doing fine. I see that the presentation is on the screen, so I will just move on from there. And so I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of where we are in terms of the status of the network. We'll start with a summary of the status. We'll move on to a summary of load shedding and load curtailment. And then I'll also share with you a very brand new, in fact, we've just concluded this week, the summer plan, which is the plan going on forward from September onwards until next year, March. Natasha, you can go. All right, so if we look at what is the current status of the system, so the financial year to date, we've sent our dispatchable plant of 1.4% lower than the same period of last year. Now, with dispatchable plant, I would include all of the units that is Eskom units as well as the dispatchable IPPs. Also, the IPP OCGTs, these are dispatchables. Their load factor currently is 9.9%. And the Eskom OCGT's load factor currently is 16.4%. And this is the financial year to date. This is quite significant because it is much higher than expected. The rate is around 1%. And that just shows you how stretched the network actually is and how much of the OCGTs we need to use to keep the network going. So there were 24 wind generation curtailment events in the year, and I'm going to stand a little bit still here and explain that we do have a situation, and this is mostly during the winter period, where we experience high wind during the evening. Now that sounds fantastic because we know that in the winter period we have a high evening peak, and it really does help us. We sometimes get up to 2,000 megawatts, 2 stages of load shedding, to put that into context, from wind generation currently installed. However, we do have a problem, and that is that in the middle of the night we get to what we call a night minimum. And of course, that's when there's no industry and your domestic load is also just about zero at that point. Everyone's asleep. And then we have to match supply and demand. And the only way that we can match that is to take some of the generation off. It makes more sense to do that when we can then quickly beef up the generation again for the next morning's peak. So therefore, it is not feasible for the coal plant. We have 2 options. We can curtail the wind, or we can ask Koeberg to come down. So those are the 2 levers that we have at our disposal. We normally do load curtailment on wind. The problem is that it's unpredictable. And when we do that, of course, we still pay for the energy. I have to also mention here that it is critically important moving forward that as much as we have instances of load curtailment, that we would also desperately need extra storage in the country, because the extra wind we have can be used to charge the batteries, and we can then also use the storage to give us more stability on the network during the periods of low load. So it is critically important that that is one of the factors that we look at going forward. And I'm mentioning this specifically in terms of the presidential plan and the 9 work streams that we have. All right, so we also had 77 days of load shedding in this financial year. That's quite significant. The last financial year we had 65, and that was the whole year, and we're now not even halfway through this year, or just about halfway through this financial year. The highest residual demand, now this is the demand that we are able to use dispatchable generators for, was 33,136 megawatts, which is quite high. However, it's about 1,500 megawatts lower than it was the previous year. However, the highest contracted peak demand, and this is now including all of the IPPs, came to 34,666 megawatts. We can move on. I see it's taking a little bit. This is just another view of what the load shedding looked like. On your left-hand side, you can see the previous financial year. And we had 43 instances of stage 2. I will later on in the presentation explain to you why it is that we normally find ourselves in stage 2. There is in fact a very good reason for that. We had 8 instances of stage 1, stage 3, 4 instances, and stage 4, 10. For this financial year, I'm not going to go through all the figures, but you can see the distribution looks much the same. And then from the 1st of January, and the reason I want to mention this in terms of the calendar year is because there's a number of reports that we often see in the media, which uses the calendar year where we in our reporting use our financial year. And then the figures don't seem to match, and then there's a whole mudsliding effect until we compare apples to apples and we find that actually we've all used the same data. So since the 1st of January, we've had 91 days of load shedding. And we also had 18 days of load curtailment. Now, your question might be then, why did we have less days of load curtailment? Because load curtailment also means that we have, we can call up on certain customers and ask them to reduce their load. That's part of what we call demand response. But sometimes the schedules overlap. So we can't ask somebody to load shed and curtail at the same time. And for that reason, they will never match in terms of number of days. Okay, and then of course the conditions for load shedding is well known. I think you're all aware of the fact that we have shortages in generation. We have serious increase in unavailability of our plant. Then we have some limitations around fuel availability. And then of course our emergency reserves needs to be replenished. We can move on. Also the coal quality, I think you're well aware of. Now, if you look at the system power system outlook, apologies, and how we do our planning, I think it's very important to note how this is done. We can move to the following slide. Many people think we do planning on a very short basis. This is not the case. Our plan is in fact a 2-year plan. I'm not going to go through all the details, but on the slide, it just gives you a sequence of events, and it starts 2 years before the time. Now, we get a capacity plan, which is mainly done by generation, and they will tell us how much capacity is available. In their plan, they take into account all of the planned outages and what they expect in terms of the training of the unplanned outages as well. And then, of course, the 18-month residual forecast, which is what we will provide from a system operator perspective. And then we take the capacity plan and we stress test it. And we stress test it with the scenarios of unplanned availability. And that ultimately leads to the summer plan. So there is a difference between the two plans. The capacity plan will have usually uses an assumption of 10,000 megawatts unplanned capacity. Whether you will see that the summer plan now has an assumption of a base case of 13,000 megawatts unplanned capacity. The reason for this is the stress testing. There is certain risks that are identified when the capacity plan is done. And when we do the summer plan, then we take all of the risk into consideration as if they have happened, and that's where the difference comes in. All right, let's continue. Okay, so we have four major components of the plan. I have mentioned most of them, so I'll just go through them very quickly. Of course, we have installed generation capacity. We know exactly what we have available, both from Eskom as well as the connected IPPs. Then we have a demand forecast. Our forecasting is excellent, and I think it's something that we need to mention, that we have some of the best forecasting ability in the world as we stand. And with that, I mean within the top 10. We know what our planned outages are, because we know, well, obviously we plan them at up to 2 years ahead, as I've just shown you. And then, of course, we have the unpredictability of the unplanned outages, and that is the UCLF and OCLF. And those are the ones that we use for the stress testing. In any 1 week, we have an uncertainty of about 4,000 megawatts on the system. And this is because of the uncertainty that we have with the unplanned outages. And the 4,000 megawatts could be either positive or negative 2,000. And that is, in fact, the reason why you will find that most of the time we have load shedding level 2, because of that uncertainty. And the uncertainty runs across a period of a week or 168 hours. And I think I've just given you my next slide, but let's go. So what we do is we do a lot of analysis, very detailed analysis. And for those of you that are not necessarily very technical, I'm not going to bore you with trying to explain all of this. What I need you to focus on is the straight lines, the green and the line and the black line. And this is basically looking at the scenarios pre-COVID and after COVID. And that is also before we started doing the reliability maintenance. We always get the question, but does it actually make a difference? Has there been a difference? Well, here you can see that in the first scenario, and we're looking at the dotted lines, but the small dotted lines, and that goes up to March 2020, you will see that our trajectory in terms of what we would have expected of unplanned outages would have been very high, up to 25,000 megawatts. However, then came COVID, and you will see that there was a very steep drop, not just in demand, but also in the way that we are managing our network. And I'm happy to show you that now the trajectory is much lower than it used to be. So as much as there's doom and gloom out there, there's also some good news. And this is what this slide is about. It actually shows you the monthly UCLF. There's a lot of detail on the slide. I'm pretty sure the slides will be provided afterwards, and you can go and have a look at the detail, or if you have any questions, we can deal with them. But you can see that there is a significant difference. The figures I will show you next when we get to the actual plan. You will see that the lower black and green line, the black one is April 2020 to date, and the green one is our trend, also April 2020 to date. So the actual and the trend, if we look at those, it actually correlates extremely well with what we are seeing in reality. So it is much lower than expected. Let's move. Now, this is my very favorite slide. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily good news. It does show you the real performance of the network. And what we show here is everything in one, and that's why I really do like this slide. And so on your left-hand side, you will see a histogram, and you will see some light coloring behind the red bars. Now, the light coloring that you see there are the 3 scenarios that we spoke about, that we stress test the plan, and I'll show you more detail of that coming just now. So those are the 3 scenarios for the winter plan that we have up to the end of August, so up to today actually. And then this data is accurate up to last week, Friday. So if you look at that, what you will find is that if you look at the red bars, for 42.5% of the time, we operated above our maximum assumption of the winter plan. Now, we have stretched the winter plan to 3 scenarios. However, we went above that. That means we had more unplanned outages than what we had expected in our worst case scenario. And then the average UCLF and OCLH over the evening peaks was around just under 15,000 megawatts over the winter period. Now, we started our testing with the 3 scenarios, 12,000, 13.5, and 15,000, just to give you an idea. Now, if you look at the right-hand slide, the right hand of the slide, that actually gives you a very visual picture. The black is the actual maximum per day, and I want to stress that it's the maximum point per day in your evening peak usually. It is not a point that is a fixed point for the whole of the day and all for 24 hours, because our network is dynamic and our peaks are dynamic. So what happens is that we vary between all 3 of these scenarios during any day. But what we are seeing here is literally the highest number for any specific day. But if you look there, you will see a lot of black that goes into the white area and beyond the plan and stretch scenarios. In fact, if you look at the bottom, you will notice that only in the last week, for the first time this winter, we went into our base case planning scenario. For the rest of the period, we actually exceeded that, and for most of the period, we were either in our worst case scenario or above that. Let's move on. Okay, so here's a summary of the plan. So all the reliability maintenance has been accounted for in the plan, as I showed you in the beginning when I showed you how we plan over a 2-year period. 12 months of the planning is fixed and it is in the plan. So all our reliability maintenance that we are doing, that is the big major outages and planned on the stations, are in the plan. The plan was stressed with the 3 scenarios. I've already explained that to you. For the upcoming summer, the scenarios is 13, 14.5, and 16,000. You will notice it's a bit higher than it was for the winter period. The reason for this, of course, is more maintenance are done during the summer period. Also, the production is higher during the summer period because you don't have the winter tariff. Which normally means that our bigger customers do maintenance during winter period and then are very operational during the summer period. For most part, the system operator therefore do need to make use of various tools, and one of them being demand response. And we are foreseeing as part of this plan and everything we're doing to try and stop load shedding now, that we will sign up more demand response. I think it's 140 megawatts by September, and then up to 200 or 240. The numbers are a little bit later in the presentation. The plan requires OCGT over weekdays. This is very important, and low diesel usage on some weekends. We have seen more diesel usage over certain weekends. However, mostly this is the case. Then also just take note that the failure of Medupi has increased our dependency on the diesel generation to manage the power system. Let's move on, please.
Sorry, ma'am. There's some noise at the background. I'm not sure whether it's coming from your side or
There's people outside. There's people outside the door. I'll quickly get them to be quiet, please.
Okay.
Apologies for that one. All right, so if we look at the risk and uncertainty, our plan is very tight. Given everything that is included in the plan, any outage slippages that we have will have a significant impact on the plan. The plan does not cater for any difficulties such as industrial action. Obviously, that is totally unpredictable, and therefore we cannot include that in the plan. I have already spoken to you about the 4,000 megawatts uncertainty, which is plus minus 2,000 megawatts. The equivalent of, and just to put that in perspective, it is 4 stages of load shedding that is uncertain over a week period. And demand response I've also spoken to you about, and the numbers here they are, is 150 megawatts by September, and by February we're looking at 400 megawatts. Then the uncertainty for the plan must be clearly communicated and understood by all stakeholders. The reason I'm saying this is because we're often getting the question as to, but why are we getting load shedding this week specifically? Why can't we tell people up front? Why don't we know this week that we're going to have load shedding next week? And this is the reason for that. We sometimes can see it coming, and if we can, we will give an early warning, but it doesn't mean that it cannot happen very suddenly. A big unit like Medupi or Kusile can cause us to go into load shedding literally within a few minutes. Please continue. So what would be the critical success factors for us moving forward in terms of the plan? Well, we will need all of the resources and funding. It has to be available to execute our plan. Any changes will have a knock-on effect. Now, this will include things like procurement, making it easy, getting all the parts there on time, getting the suppliers there on time, so that we can have the outages executed as per the plan. And of course, bringing back the plant on time. The plan also relies on sufficient diesel. So that's another big issue that we need to look at. Especially when we have high unplanned outages. Without sufficient diesel to power our OCGTs, and we have about 3,000 of them, 3,000 megawatts worth of them, 3 additional stages of load shedding could be added to our scenarios. Now, one of the things to mention here is that we do sometimes take a little longer in terms of the actual diesel, given that we are tracking the diesel into Ankerlig. However, if we look at our performance versus that of the IPPs, we are still doing much better. If you were wondering in the beginning of the presentation why the load factor on the Eskom OCGTs are so much higher, is in many cases our IPP counterparts simply cannot get the diesel to the plant in time to be able to assist us faster. Prolonged diesel outages may result in delays in getting fuel to the stations, and therefore a very critical factor for us is approval of funds, the procurement of the product, the logistics, the moving of fuel. As you know, this is part of our emergency reserves. I also have to mention that in our SO 48 is very clear that if we do have the diesel, we are obliged to run the OCGTs. Please, can we move on? This is just an overall of what the system looks like. If you look at the plan, on top you have the assumption of the 13,000 UCLF. UCLF there includes the OCLF, that is the unplanned unavailability. The green part is the planned unavailability, meaning the outages that we have. The black is the actual forecast, what we are expecting. You will see a little bit of yellow, it's our operating reserve. The reason for that yellow is actually very important. Our operating reserve is what keeps the network stable. That is a little bit of capacity that we have available within our fleet to take us up and down. We call it a ramping up and down, so that we keep the 50 Hertz stability stable. If the 50 Hertz stability is not kept stable, then the network becomes unstable and it is extremely difficult to manage and to keep the network in control. So if we do mention the word black start, that is when that scenario is not working. All right, and then you will see the available capacity of gas that we have, that is the pink one, and then the blue is predominantly our coal fleet. Let's move on. And this is a slide you've all been waiting for. And this is the actual summer plan. Just to explain the slide to you, here are the 3 test case scenarios, our stress test. You have a base case plus 1.5 megawatts, and then a base case plus 3,000 megawatts. Now, what you if you look at the black dots, you'll see a number within the black dot. The number within the black dot would indicate the expected stage of load shedding. So if you look at the month of September, simply because it's the one closest to us now, if we do operate within the base case, we are not expecting any days of load shedding. You will notice that. However, if we do operate in the base case plus 1,500, we expect 19 days of phase 2 load shedding. And the same goes if you go to the base case plus 3,000, that goes to stage 3 and 27 days. Now, what I have to mention here, if you recall the slide that I had with the little black line that was moving up and down the 3 different scenarios, we are not in any one of the scenarios on a permanent basis 24/7. All right, so this is absolutely the worst case scenario. And often these numbers, even if misinterpreted, seems like we are headed for a major disaster. The fact is, yes, we are expecting more load shedding. However, this is not cast in stone. What you're seeing here is literally the worst case scenario. And we do move around all the time. So if we are not in the stress scenario on the peak period, we then will not see this. Also keep in mind that during the summertime, we don't have a distinct peak as we have in the winter time for the morning and the evening. Our loading pattern looks very much like a plateau. So you'll see a rise in the morning and a little dip during the day, but very slightly, and then basically for the most of the day, and then dropping off after evening peak. If you can picture Table Mountain, that's basically what it will look like during summertime. So that's what I would like to stress on this slide. Let's move further. This is my last slide. And then this, we included this so that to explain the importance of all the interventions that is currently happening at the National Energy Crisis Committee and what we are expecting. I think that you would be very interested to see what the different numbers are. I have to stress that this is preliminary. It is work in development, not cast in stone as well, but this is what we are seeing over the different periods. So over 6 months, we are hoping for about 3,500 megawatts. And so it continues all the way to, in 36 months, we are looking at 8,000 megawatts to be added to the system. Here again, I have to stress that this is not just a combination of wind and solar. That is another misnomer that we keep on hearing about, that wind and solar is going to solve the problem. We must also keep in mind that as we are adding more wind and solar to the network, we are in fact retiring the coal fleet up to the year 2035. That means that the network becomes more unstable. So there are other products that we will need. Mainly one of them would be storage, and not just battery storage, because battery storage is a very short-term storage solution. We very desperately need to get pump storage in as well, because that is a very useful tool for us to overcome some of the challenges that we do have. Just picture a day when you have overcast weather across the country. You would typically not have a lot of wind during that period, and very, very little solar. And that's what we need to overcome. We also need to look at products to overcome things like inertia, meaning to keep the 50 hertz going, so that we keep the network stable. So these are all the different initiatives that are currently on the go or are being planned to be put in place. We have dates, we have numbers there for you to pursue, and that is basically what we're looking at. I will stop here and just conclude with the bottom line that successful implementation of all of these initiatives will greatly reduce our risk of load shedding, keeping in mind that it has to happen fast and with all of the resources there. So I'm going to need, as a system operator, but not just myself, of course, Eskom, all of the different departments and all of the different role players to do their part and to help and assist us. Timing of our new generation capacity is dependent on the market response and the regulatory processes. And this is where we will predominantly need help. Thank you very much. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I will have to give over to the chairperson of the Mineral Resources to take this portion of question and answering and the engagement. But Honorable Luzipo, Honorable Shabalala is number one on the list of people who will be speaking. She has already indicated to me that you will be in the bus in the few minutes to Parliament. Therefore, you would like to be the fair to get an opportunity to speak first. Honorable Luzipo, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go to Honorable Shabalala, I see the hand of Honorable Kachalia, and then it will be Honorable Dlamini, then it will be Honorable Mailem, and then Honorable Mashaule on that fashion. So can I give to Honorable Shabalala?
Right, thank you so much, Honorable Luzipo. I thought, let me switch on my video so you can put the face to the name. I know at some point you were very strict about it, but please allow me to also switch off at a particular point. Let me greet all of you and obviously welcome the joint portfolio. And this takes place after the Koeberg and oversight visit that we had done. Now, I would want to find out the issues of NUMSA so that they are not just being taken by the way, matter. We know that the unions came and made presentation, and according to our chairperson's opening remarks, he was correct to say that we need to understand, especially this matter of whistleblowers. At what point do you really protect the whistleblowers? When people come in the establishment and they're able to raise fundamental issues, and at the end of the day, we just hear by media and so forth that people have been suspended, can we be taken into confidence? Exactly that issue, when the board chairperson was saying that he needs to investigate, it surpasses me that he also is not well informed around this matter. So I would really implore that Eskom takes us into confidence. What are really the issues? We don't want to enter into employee and employer relations necessarily. However, we do represent the people, and the people have got the right to really lay complaints to Parliament, soliciting some sort of a mediation, and by trying to get to the crux of the issues. But there are labor laws in this country that protects the workers. So I would really want to employ Eskom. They need to find a way to really take us into confidence. While I'm on comments, Deputy Minister, I'm not too sure. I have issues with Eskom insofar as the Soweto matter, and I'm not going to stop around Soweto. And that brings me to this issue around customer and service provider relationship. The matter of Soweto and meter boxes in installation, particularly on what we call Ward 121 in Muletsani, Tladi, and so forth. There are many other areas in Gauteng where it's been hardly hit around matters of switching off electricity on the basis that you want to deal, one, with maintenance, you also want to deal with boxes, but you want to install meter boxes. And councillors find themselves in the call phase with the community, in clash with the community, because they are seen as a conduit between community and its people. But Eskom is failing to engage its customers, because when ward councillors are calling you to come, Eskom doesn't come, it doesn't show up, but it also doesn't live up to the promises that Eskom would have made around installation of meter boxes, engaging the customers. We understand, and as the ANC, we are also reiterating that people must pay for services. However, what you do around that is quite important, because we have people and indigent communities that we are dealing with. So don't be arrogant about it and just go and want to install meter boxes without necessarily having concern of customers. And this is the question I want to pose to you. And you have a person by the name of Mr. Mchalin Zola. He needs to really take you on board, Mr. Director, in case you are not aware around that issue. For me, it's a very emotional issue, and I want to raise it sharply with yourself to a point where I want to employ you so that you are able to give us access to yourselves. Because even as members of Parliament, we don't even have access to yourselves. You hardly come to us, we hardly speak to yourselves, we don't have your contacts. Perhaps the other counterparts who are other opposition, they do have, but some of us we don't have. And this is appalling from where I'm seated. So I'm just saying to yourself, please come closer to this issue. Do not impose, do not force community on the issue of meter boxes. Engage your customers, enter into arrangements of your customers when you do this exercise. We agree with you, you need to be in a position to really collect revenue, but how you go about doing that, don't put the lives of councillors at risk, because communities don't understand you, they don't know you, they all know their public representatives, they go to their houses, they threaten to burn their houses. So let me leave that point, but I want to raise it sharply. Perhaps also on the comments, Deputy Minister, I want to know, it must sound very odd, but just for my own comfort, are you really happy as DPE, as you oversight Eskom, with the performance of the management of Eskom at this point? And if you are happy and you are excited, and what are the areas that we've seen improvements thus far? We were told when Mr. Director came on, the issue of load shedding will cease to happen, but we're seeing it perpetually going on. And as it continues, and on the slide presentation, whether winter season, cold seasons, and so forth and so on. But I think it's quite important that take us into confidence around this performance and what you do, and when you conduct the performance agreements with the senior officials, and at what point are you really excited about their performance really? Because from where I'm seated, South Africans is starting to have a doubt, and they're doubting the ANC government. They're not doubting Eskom management, because we would have put people there, given them responsibility. But when things are going AWOL, it's the ANC that takes the fall and the punch in this instance, which is very unfortunate. Now, let me come to the comments, and I'm going to switch off my video, Chairperson. On the president, that did not necessarily mention where Eskom will get the funds to procure additional capacity, as well as the budget to undertake more maintenance. Now, Eskom tariff is set by the National Energy Regulator, the NERSA, which dictates Eskom revenue. So additional expenditure will have to be recovered through the tariffs and paid by the consumers, who are already struggling with rising electricity prices. Now, I want to find out, will this also provide confidence for investment by the private sector and returns of the investment if it's unknown? And Eskom has been requesting additional capacity between the 4,000 that you mentioned in your presentation and to 6,000 megawatts for the past 4 years. This addition capacity has not been forthcoming. And now the Department of Minerals and Energy needs to account for this lack of additional capacity, if really we can also be made to understand where you're going to take them. The National Treasury commitment to reducing the stock of public debt to attract capital inflows has crowded out public investment in SOEs, and this in turn makes SOEs susceptible to reliance on international financial markets. So I want to understand from where you are seated as Eskom, how are we really attracting investment on the issues of Eskom, and can we really say from where we are seated we are comfortable? My last question, Chairperson, is that the addressing of the gap between installed capacity and reliable supply, and the proposal really, when you're looking at the energy supply side, Eskom has installed capacity of 46,000 megawatts and reliable supply of 28,000 megawatts. This means that Eskom has power stations that are not optimally functioning to supply electricity to the grid. And I would want to ask you, would it really hurt you if you were to rather deal with a moreover skill and capacity that needs to be sought from CSIR and other government entities with engineering capacity to really facilitate this maintenance? The remaining units at Medupe and Kusile will be brought online as quickly as possible, as you would have said. Additional units at Letabo and Koeberg are returning to service. Now, we have been hearing about the DA administration in Western Cape, where they are telling us that already they're taking people off the grid of Eskom, and they are inviting IPPs and so forth and so on in the Western Cape. I want to find out, have you had a discussion with them around this matter, or are they just working on their own and taking everybody and your customers off the grid? And what type that impact, how does it impact on Eskom on this issue? My last point, these power stations that are really, we're seeing largely responsible for the load shedding we're experiencing, because their parts are no longer manufactured around the world. They are also very costly to taxpayers in terms of maintenance. What we should rather be saying, I don't know, I might be wrong, but I want you to come on this issue. Rather, what shouldn't we be saying, right? Rather, to raise is not whether the coal power station should be repurposed or not. I want to hear your thoughts. The power stations have reached their end of functionality, and the issue of repurposing, you should be able to tell us what then happens to ensure that you restore these power stations, this coal power stations. And the discussion around the matter of job security, retaining and redeploying of employees of power stations and livelihoods of communities linked to these power stations. This is a very important point. People need to understand, and Eskom needs to understand, that when you switch off from 9 o'clock until in the evening, and you switch off for more than 3 months or 2 weeks, there is lives of people. There are clinics that are unable to operate and assist its communities, but there's also matters around communities not being in a position, grandmothers or older persons who are taking chronic medications that stay in the appliances and so forth and so on. And I think that you need to be able to appreciate that. I want you to address this issue of communication to customers. You really need to step up your game when it comes to these matters, so people can make proper arrangement before you start switching off, even if it's unforeseen circumstances. Do not be arrogant when you interact with communities, Mr. Director, especially communicating these matters. You really need to be understanding the complexities that are surrounding this matter of load shedding and the threatening of the lives at this point. Let me leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Honorable Kachalia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief given the length of the previous intervention. I'd like to find out what progress there is in the in rehabilitating the broken 17,000 megawatts which exist, and are they in the plan on slide 15? And over what period can we expect these to come online, and at what cost, and what shortfalls are there, if any, to finance these? Secondly, how much capacity has been provided by wind and solar in the past year versus how much we pay for that portion that we haven't used as a result of curtailment? Thirdly, when will Koeberg be fully online, and why was this delay not highlighted when we conducted oversight in the past? And also, what are the implications of NUM-NUM's concerns? Fourthly, on your plan, how much diesel are you earmarking in a worst-case scenario, and at what cost over the next year, September to March? And finally, just a comment, we appreciate being taken through the presentation, but it's reasonably technical, and can we have, in the future as well, a layman's summary, particularly as the presentation was sent to us this morning at 8:43 a.m. and our meeting started at 9. So, it puts considerable strain on us. Thanks very much.
Honorable Zamin. Honorable Zamin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Morning, colleagues. I have quite a bit to say on this matter, but first and foremost, let us appreciate that the oversight was partly influenced by the letter written by comrades from NUM on issues relating to Eskom. And this meeting is a product of that oversight. So I don't think it's fair and acceptable that Eskom is not able to respond.
You are too busy, Honorable Zamini.
No, I'm not. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair that Eskom is not able to respond to issues of NUM when this whole thing was kickstarted by NUM. It's not fair. Eskom must be able to respond. Otherwise, why are they here? That's one. Two, comrades, colleagues, because there are other people as well. I think it's only fair to look at things from a different angle. You see, in South Africa, we have a different problem. We have a growing population, and the supply of electricity is not matching that pace. I remember around 2010, there was an IRP led by energy regulator of South Africa to look into the energy issues of South Africa. At that point, the issue of nuclear was being sold to us, but there was some opposition to nuclear. The interesting part is that all that opposition and the reasons that were being stated had never happened at Koeberg. For the past 40 years, that nuclear power plant is working perfectly. Owing to age now, there are a few problems here and there. Now, we need to be able to also use the renewables in a manner that is going to benefit the country, not necessarily business. You see, in terms of renewables, you have over 1 million people in Gauteng alone who stays in squatter camps. Those people are not able to buy electricity, they are indigent. This then means at some point, these people will have to steal electricity. And as a result of that, you have a problem now with, what are these things? Power supplies, transformers getting blown because of being overloaded and whatnot. Why aren't we looking at a possibility of saying, look, in squatter camps and indigent communities, let them have solar panels and whatnot so that they get off the grid. And that saves the infrastructure of Eskom, and then it enables people who can afford to also be supplied by Eskom, because at this juncture, you are quickly going to have people who can afford getting off the grid, and the people who can't afford will have to be serviced by Eskom. Eskom will not be able to generate money to finance their maintenance and whatnot. That's the other thing. So in terms of what we are doing, does it respond to the challenges that the country is facing, or we are just trying to manage a situation that is not really manageable? Thanks, Chair.
Honorable Milam.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to everybody. Chairperson, I've got several questions, but let me just start with a comment. I find it very interesting that Honorable Dlamini says that Koeberg has been operating perfectly for 40 years. Koeberg has a lifetime energy availability factor of just 72%. And indeed, load shedding this year has been driven to a large extent by Unit 2 of Koeberg being offline for an extended period, during which time numerous life extension operations were supposed to take place, but didn't. So that brings me to my questions. Number one, when the business case was made for life extension at Koeberg back in 2010, a figure of 20 billion Rand was put forward as the cost of those life extension operations. At the time, the Rand-dollar exchange rate was in the region of 7.50 Rand to the dollar. What I'd like to know is, what's the revised estimate for the life extension at Koeberg based in 2022 Rand-dollar exchange rates? Secondly, has a revised program of work been developed for the life extension program, given the delays that have been experienced in replacing the steam generators? What does that time frame look like? Then number three, still with Koeberg, what is the impact on the license renewal? Koeberg's operating license expires in 2024. And given the delays on the life extension operations, what is the impact on its license renewal? Is it likely to get a license renewal given that it is not meeting the safety and operational standards that are required for a new license? I'd really like some input into that. Then my last question, Chairperson, looks at a broader system outlook and the impact on load shedding. And here I'd really like some input from Eskom on what is being done to upgrade the transmission infrastructure, especially in light of the fact that most of our renewable resource potential is in areas where Eskom has limited ability to evacuate such power from these areas. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Mashaule.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to yourself and the Chair Makatwa. Greetings to the Deputy Minister, and greetings to my colleagues. Chair, I have a few questions that I have decided to abandon. but rather try and save the two chairpersons on what I think they are expected to do. And I think that will avoid what is happening now, where we speak about the concerns raised by NUM and the issue of load shedding in the same presentation. That's why we're not getting answers on the issue of NUM. Chair, I'll draw your attention to the fact that we went to Koeberg jointly. We received a presentation from Eskom. We got a letter of concern from NUM, which we expected that the Eskom management will respond to in this meeting. And also for us to agree in going back to finish what is a joint oversight in Koeberg, so that we compile a joint report which will be tabled to the National Assembly for adoption. That is the first thing that we ought to do. Now, the second issue, and I will take it step by step, Chair, is that on the 29th of June, 2022, Honorable Kwangwa wrote to the Speaker asking or requesting for an urgent debate on the matter of national importance for discussion by the House, which was load shedding. The Speaker responded that his letter did not meet requirement and subsequently wrote to the House Chairperson, Mr. Frolick, requesting that the two committees, Mineral Resources and Energy, as well as Public Enterprise, deal with this matter and prioritize the matter and develop a specific program to deal with this matter within the context of our mandate and powers, and where applicable, report to the House. From there, on the 11th of July, the chair, House Chair, wrote to Chair Makaka and Honorable Luzipo. That's why we are here now, to prioritize this matter and develop a specific program and report to the House. Now, we've received a presentation today about load shedding, which we have been doing for the, I don't know how, for the past 2 years. And Comrade Judith has asked, when is load shedding coming to an end? Because we were told when Mr. Director came that will take 1 year and 8 months to 2 years. We're still debating the same thing. Now, we are directed to come with a specific program of Parliament, which if we report, or when we report to the National Assembly for adoption, that program will be directive to Eskom to follow the steps that has been adopted and the program that has been adopted by the National Assembly of South Africa. And that is where we will have to step by step make Eskom account and not get these presentations that are endless. We say on this day, our program said, for this month, this is what we are supposed to do. It's not your choice anymore. It's what Parliament of the Republic of South Africa has adopted. Where are you on this issue? And then they report on that. We avoid these endless long presentations that don't change at all. And Chair, I want to propose that because this duty has been directed to the two committees. Let's have the chair, the two chairs, with their researchers and content advisors and all of that, preparing what we will consider a program, specific program, that we think will help Eskom in dealing with load shedding. You bring it to a joint meeting, we go step by step on where do we agree, where do we disagree, where do we empower as different political parties, where do we empower that presentation. And if agreeing at the end, we do what we are directed by the speaker, adopt it, and take it to the National Assembly for adoption. And from there, the speaker will write to Eskom and say, the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa has developed a program. This is the program. And then we'll do what we call oversight on a time-years basis. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, honorable members. With your input, before I go to the DM, the nature of my chairing DM is that I give the executive authority, which is responsible for primary accountability to Parliament. And then it's up to you to spread the, the responses. Just a few things before you can give answers, which I think are a worry. Maybe you will respond to that. The first thing is that what should be a worry is that when I listened to the presentation, in as much as it's not saying it openly, but the presentation says, bless yourselves for more. It's not an end. And I find it that there's some degree of contradiction in the presentation, because on the other side, it says, on your renewables and others, even if you consider them, they will not match what we can provide. Now, one would say on the other side, with what is happening, you are actually encouraging for that. Now, why would you say you cannot match that? Two, it is silent to recent developments. It's not saying, for an example, it appreciates or accepts the intervention made by and the announcement made by the president, and to what extent what now is being presented relates to that. One would say it's like nothing has happened. The presentation is just bringing in what I would say mostly is complaints or lamentations rather than concrete solutions. The third part is that I'm worried about this presentation because concretely, it does not provide what is being done with the challenge. A typical example is to talk to the issues of maintenance. What are the maintenance obligations to those who are responsible? For an example, the drop of a unit or a unit that has a problem, I've always argued, I can't understand, because it assumes that the systems in place are unable to detect those possibilities and potentials. And I always said, in this day and age of 4IR, indicators are always there. Even for a basic thing like a car, it tells you how many days are left for you, you are due for service. It tells you when you are going to have tear and wear as far as brakes and other things that are there. I'm not sure what are the contractual obligations in terms that, and it would have been nice to get it to say for those that enters maintenance contractual obligations, there are certain standards that are put, and failure to meet those standards. Sitting here, I can't get the gist of where the problem is. I can't get, for an example, even on issues of financial supply in relation to service provision. the different prices of the same product and other things. I think for me, there's a huge gap on what the presentation is doing. So I'm not saying it must be given now, and I take note of Honorable Mahlaule says, maybe it's something that it can be considered in that platform if we so agree. But one thing I think it's important, honorable members, and I want us to draw a difference on these things. And maybe we may agree on that proposal also that was made. Two things that are not, and I'm not sure, Mr. Director, whether I will agree with you. I find it very difficult that the response to the NUM letter it needed too much time. We were dealing with the response to the issues raised by NUM. Because of time, we agreed that let's put it on hold. We will come back and finish that discussion. So if somebody then tells me that that discussion is happening tomorrow, I find it very difficult that I would say, hey, I can't respond now because I was not aware. How can I be not aware of something that we were dealing with at that time? Maybe you have to clarify the problems with dealing with a matter that you are already dealing with it, and then you adjourn in order to proceed at a certain moment. The third point, which it also I'm tempted, is that in the oversight visit, we only visited the site. Then we received the presentation. Maybe let's agree that we may have now to remanufacture or reintroduce those presentations as they were on the oversight visit. And then say, this is how far we have gone, and this is what will be done. In the responses here, there is absolutely no response, even on the questions raised, including the contracts that and the timelines that were a problem with regards to that presentation at Koeberg. Maybe I will throw something that we may have to take into consideration. The fact of the matter, though, I must say now, whether it's suspension or it's no suspension, any person that is relevant on the work of the Portfolio Committee of Parliament, any Portfolio Committee of Parliament, cannot be subjected to conditions imposed by an institution, including an institution of the state. That it's neither here nor there. Any person who is relevant to assist the work of a portfolio committee, we have a duty as portfolio committees of Parliament to utilize any of those persons. But before I then throw back what I thought were proposals from honorable members, can I then give the Deputy Minister?
Well, thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you for the honorable members for the engagement with the report. Chair, at the beginning, I heard the group chief executive intimating that they got notice on Friday verbally of what was expected, and the letter received on Saturday, which constrained their preparation for today's meeting. Not that I am in any way condoning such, for I would have thought there would have been proper procedures for notification about meetings, etc. But clearly, I think from the point of view of the expectation from the honorable members and the committee, there seems to be somewhat a conflation as I listen between, firstly, what we understood to be the objective of this session, which was a feedback meeting, an update from the oversight that was taking place at Koeberg. I think there's been just a conflation in the preparation, which is bringing about the confusion that is seemingly obtaining here. And secondly, Chair, I really would have preferred that it is very much expressed that let the joint ministers in terms of DMRE as well as DPE come before the joint committees to speak to the elements of the program as announced by the president, because the president, as part of responding to the energy challenges the country is facing, there was a statement made, a suggestion of what steps would be taken. I'm aware that there is an interministerial committee that is seized with the matter. I am not suggesting that there would, because at the final end, the operation of anything that the ministerial committee would be dealing with must be found or must be seen, how it impacts the operational environment at Eskom. So I would be more inclined, Chair, to saying perhaps the joint portfolio committees are still owed that specific account and progress report in respect thereto, which can be looked at against what Eskom is already experiencing in respect of such interventions. It is just a request out of seeing that there is a bit of a discord insofar as the expectations and the issues to the extent they've been dealt with here. It would be a request, Chair, with respect, but there are other matters that are really of an information nature that I think the board, as well as the group chief executive, the entire executive team, can be able to really dispose of. But I think the broader matters that were really speaking to the expectation don't seem to have been properly canvassed in the report that has been made. They may indicate as to what progress is there, if any, but that matter, which I think has been raised repeatedly to do with the submissions that were received from the employee formation, NUM, perhaps there should have been dealt with somewhat in terms of what were those issues, what is the management posture towards those matters. And then we come with a comprehensive report and update flowing from what the president has addressed to the nation as it dealt with the issue of the energy challenges for the country. If I'm wrong, I will really accept correction, but I think perhaps we may want to refine this and come back in a proper way. Having said that, Chair, the board as well as the CEO may canvass further any points. Hopefully, we should find each other in terms of where to from here. Thank you very much, Chair. If I may request, Chair, that they then come through the board as well as the executive team.
I thought you were doing so, Diane.
Honourable Chair, if I can then come in and provide a response, please.
That's in order.
Thank you very much. Honourable Deputy Minister, Honourable Chair, Honourable members of the board. Let me first start off by saying that I absolutely want to reaffirm the respect of Eskom for the institution of Parliament, and also for every citizen of the country to approach Parliament with any matter whatsoever, and that Parliament obviously has a right to investigate and consider any and all complaints that are submitted to it. So we do not wish to in any way derogate from that residual right that Parliament and its committees have. Let me give you the committee's background to the steam generator replacement project and the disciplinary steps that were taken, and then I'll also elucidate some of the matters that have arisen due to disciplinary steps that have been taken. The three...
Sorry, can we start first with the point that we were dealing with? I'm noticing so that if we don't finish what you are giving now, we may have to then say, based on the issues that were raised by NUM, we will need those responses in writing.
We can provide those, Chair. That is,
let's now deal with the issue with regards to the presentation that you have made. Then you can then come back to the issues that members have proposed. Because for now, the truth is there is no report that is written for the committee on the issues that it has raised with regard to its oversight visit. Can we deal with this one first, and then we'll see when time goes on, what can we do?
Right, thank you for that guidance, Honourable Chair. I will then proceed with dealing with the questions that were raised by members. Honourable Chabalala made reference to NUMSA. The complainant in this case is actually NUM, not NUMSA. The protection of the relevant piece of legislation that guides disciplinary processes and that is relevant to this instance is the Protected Disclosures Act. To our knowledge, Honourable Chabalala, there has been no protected disclosure made that meets with the requirements of the Protected Disclosures Act. As the Chair has suggested, we will further substantiate this position in our written submission. I may just also add that the three people suspended, the three employees suspended, are all senior managers in Eskom. They are not lower level employees. With regard to load reduction in Soweto, in all areas where Eskom is experiencing illegal connections, we are rolling out the installation of prepaid meters. This is in an endeavor, as the Honourable Chabalala acknowledged, to secure revenue that is due to us and to prevent electricity theft, which unfortunately is still rife in many parts of the country. And we then have to, in order to protect our income statement, we have to intervene and ensure that we can in fact secure the revenue. So those campaigns are run by our distribution business. We do communicate in advance. We do share information with the residents. We inform them that we are intending to install these prepaid meters. In some instances, these installation teams are not welcomed by residents because this will impose an obligation to them to pay for electricity that they have either to not respected, and therefore we sometimes meet with resistance, which may include violence directed against our teams. And in those instances, we have no alternative but to withdraw and then resume load reduction measures in order to protect the infrastructure from overloading, which causes the transformers to explode, creating a number of safety risks. So this is a difficult situation. The Honourable Chabalala has raised the matter of indigent customers, as was also raised by the Honourable Dlamini. And indigent users, in fact, are able to apply to their local municipality to be supplied with a free basic electricity allowance amounting to 50 kilowatt hours per month. This is an attempt by government, it is funded by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, to ensure that indigent people in South Africa are able to enjoy access to a certain minimum amount of electricity in order to provide also energy to the poorest of the poor. So that program is in place. I think the observation that I can make there, Honourable Chair, is that the uptake of this free basic electricity program really has not been as positive as we would have liked to see. It appears that either people are not aware of the program or they find the application process too onerous, and therefore we still have to contend with the matter of illegal connections and also electricity theft. The Honourable Chabalala is 100% correct. There is a disconnect between the political accountability attributable to local councillors and the supply of a very crucial public service such as electricity. We have therefore entered into discussions over the past 2 years with the City Council of Johannesburg with a view to transferring Soweto to the municipality. And the idea behind that is to ensure that we can coincide the delivery of service with political accountability. We have had some challenges with fluctuations and turbulence at mayoral level, and hopefully we can soon be in a position to make progress on this important transaction, which we believe will resolve many of the frustrations experienced by the residents of Soweto as well as their councillors, and also be to the benefit of Eskom by enhancing our revenue security. The tariffs that the Honourable Member referred to, of course, are regulated by NERSA, so those are not discretionary. They're not imposed by Eskom in a vacuum. We do so in strict compliance with the directive that we receive from NERSA. So we don't have the discretion to deviate from what has been regulated. I must also stress that Eskom itself is not able to procure additional generation capacity. We're also not in a position to build new plant without a so-called Section 34 approval provided by the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy in terms of the Electricity Regulation Act. And we therefore are unable to make investments, buy new electricity without the consent of the DMRE on the one hand, and the structure that has been established on the other hand to procure new capacity is that this is done through the Independent Power Producer Office, which is located in the DMRE, and the IPP office runs the bid windows that is responsible for bringing more capacity onto the grid. So my submission would be, Honourable Chair, that questions in that regard with progress on adding new capacity to the grid be directed at the DMRE and the IPP office, who would be best positioned to answer that question. Similarly, questions regarding National Treasury, I would submit, are best directed at that department. We have seen a number of municipalities exploring the opportunity to enter into power purchase agreements with independent power producers. Honourable Chabalala, some of those are in the Western Cape, others are in Gauteng, so it's not confined to a particular province. We actually think that this is a positive development for Eskom because we are currently generating electricity from our open cycle gas turbines using diesel at significantly higher cost than we are able to recover from consumers, to the extent that the burden on the grid is alleviated by more electricity being generated by independent power producers and bought directly by those municipalities. We will be able to reduce the consumption of diesel and this will be a significant cost saving to Eskom and ultimately also to the South African electricity consumer. We are in the process of pursuing projects to repurpose and repower power stations that have reached the end of their lives. The first example in this instance is the Komati power station. This power station has been operating since 1961. It is now past its useful operating life. There is only one unit out of 9 left operating, and that unit is scheduled to be shut down before the end of this year. We are going to invest in a number of different projects there in order to provide the job security that the honourable member refers to. We are going to build a 100 megawatt PV solar plant. We are installing a manufacturing line to manufacture modular microgrids on site in order to create employment at that plant. We are exploring opportunities with the local community to develop agrivoltaic projects where we develop farming communities as well as electricity generation. We're also looking at the opportunity of building a 40 to 70 megawatt wind farm. And we are also, very importantly, going to collaborate with the Cape Peninsula University of Technology to establish a training center to retrain and reskill and upskill workers in the coal value chain to become solar and PV technicians with accredited qualifications. So there's a very extensive program that we are launching to ensure that the energy transition, which owing to technological developments really is inevitable, that transition is going to be a just one. And that is a very important element that we as a management team and as the board of Eskom are absolutely committed to doing. The communication in terms of load reduction as well as load shedding, I can give the honourable members the assurance that we do communicate. We do issue statements to the relevant media about areas where load reduction will be implemented. We also communicate extensively with regard to load shedding. Where there is load reduction that is being implemented, I'm personally aware of at least one radio station in Gauteng that messages this in their news bulletins every day when load reduction is implemented. So we do, I think, communicate quite transparently and openly on our media platforms to ensure that people are adequately informed. I'm going to ask Rolani Matabula, I think Rolani is online, our managing director of our generation business, to...
Sorry, CEO. With all humility, I'm looking at time. I was consulting with the chair of public enterprise. We seem to be in agreement. Maybe he will confirm. The time is literally out of us, outside us. Wanted to suggest to the meeting, if we so agree, that first we take the proposal that was written there by Honorable Kachalia, that please respond to all these questions that were raised in writing, forward them to the committee secretariat, including the one that was going to be answered now. Secondly, we allow the two chairpersons to work out one on a plan to deal with the issue of the letter that was written by the speaker, received by the committees through the House chairperson. We proceed in that fashion to say what then needs to be done, take into cognizance your answers will be it will be submitted in writing as well as the presentation. Yes, maybe we will also have to take into consideration the issue that the DM had raised with regards to the presidential intervention on the matter. We then come back to the two committees, joint committees, suggest what we think should be the way forward with the agency it deserves. We may then call you back again on the same matters that we are raising, because I don't think we've interrogated enough, or where we think there are gaps. Now we will be specific on what has to be done. Secondly, the two chairpersons and the committee secretariat will work out now on how to attend to the outstanding matter of the visit to Koeberg on the two reasons that made the two committees to take that joint visit, including the letter of concerns that was raised by NUM, but also including the issue of challenges faced by Koeberg as far as the issues that relates to maintenance. Can honorable members allow us to do so? Obviously, as a matter of high priority. In the absence, do we agree, honorable members? Is there any view contrary to that?
Agreed, Chair. Judith Chabalala, agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Can I then, before I do that, give just 5 seconds, DM? Just to
No, Chair, Chair. We're comfortable with your summary. I think it's proper. Thank you.
Okay. Co-chair, can I now give you to close the meeting? There is something where we come from that if somebody nigga, those who smoke, so can you do so?
Okay. No, thank you, Chair. I think it's clear, honorable members, I've got no power to overrule the decision that the committee members have already reached. Mine is just to say officially the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much to everybody who attended our session today. Yeah, thank you so much. The meeting is adjourned, Chair.
Thank you.
Recording stop.